this is day 3 of chapter 1 of probability and statistics. Our topic today is observational studies versus experiments. What's the difference between them? What I would like by the end of today is for you to be able to identify the differences between an experiment and an observational study. So we're going to start off real quick with a review from yesterday, and then we'll get into the lesson for today. So on this slide here, what I would like you guys to do is I have a bunch of blanks for samples. So what is the sample? And then here, listed right here are our populations. So cartoon, student body, book, bushel, gross of pencils, flock, box of Oreos, and whole pizza. So these are the populations. And which one of these answers over here would be the sample that goes with it? So quickly pause the video and try to identify those for each situation. Alright, you can see on the screen my answers for each one. I think some of these were a little bit easier to figure out, but there you go. For each population, listed as a sample that goes with it. So check your answers with mine. Make sure that we agree. There are 10 questions on there. If you got less than 8 of them correct, I'd like you to go back, re-watch the video from yesterday. Make sure you understand what sample and population are. So let's do one more quick review from our lesson from yesterday, and then we will dive in. I am a Harry Potter buff. I don't know if any of you are, but I've read all of them. I hope you have. They're wonderful books. So if you think about J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, I'll read the question, what it says. It says, different types of writing can sometimes be distinguished by the lengths of the words used. A student interested in this fact wants to study the length of words used by J.K. Rowling in her Harry Potter books. She opens a Harry Potter book at random and records the lengths of the first 50 words on the page. So think about this question with this situation. What is the population? What is the population in this study? What is the sample? And what variable is the student measuring? So I'd like you to pause the video in your notes, try to identify what those 3 things are. So I had to stop and think about this as well. And obviously the population in this study, that is all of the words in all of the Harry Potter books. The sample, it's the 50 words that she recorded. And what variable is the student measuring? Well, they're trying to measure the lengths of words. That's what they're measuring. That's what I would say, at least. Alright, so let's move on to today's lesson. Willy Wonka. That's what we're going to start off today's lesson with. How many of you, I wonder if any of you watched Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Now, probably more of you watched Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Willy Wonka might be before your time. But if you walk into a Willy Wonka candy shop, think about like all the different choices there would be. That's a lot. That's a pretty big amount of options. And so as you think about that, okay, right now we're going to quickly just pick a candy you would like to buy. Like think about this list of these 7 different candies. Which one would you like to buy if you could buy one? Okay. What we're doing right now is we're making a survey. We are asking people questions. We're asking them what they would like. And so if you think about that, think about, okay, do you think that's an observation or do you think it's an experiment? And I want you guys right now to try and decide which one you think it is. All right, here's our second question. Here's our second survey. If you think about the lesson yesterday, or the lesson, day 2 lesson, or lesson 2, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being a low and 10 being a high, rate how much you enjoyed the lecture yesterday. Rate how much you are enjoying the lecture so far today. And rate how Prob and Stats is going for you so far this summer. As you rate these, think about, okay, is this an observation or is this an experiment? Which one are we performing? So what I would like you to do now is pause the video in just a second and read on page 6 where it talks about observational studies. It goes a little bit on to page 7. And then once you finish that, flip to page 13 in your textbook and read about experiments. And so it goes a little bit on to page 14, 3 more lines on 14, starts at the top of page 13. So pause the video now and take the time to read those pages. So now you've taken the time to read those pages. Page 6 was the observational studies. It's talking about Jane Goodall. And you've probably heard about Jane Goodall before. She's a woman who she wanted to study chimpanzees. And so what she did is she actually lived with chimpanzees for a while. And she went and she observed them. She didn't run experiments on them. She didn't do anything. She just observed what the chimpanzees were doing. And she wrote it down and she recorded it. So that's an observation. If you're not participating in it, you're just watching. And so the definition the book gives us is an observational study observes individuals and measures variables of interest, but does not attempt to influence the response. So we're not trying to change what's happening at all. And the purpose of an observational study is to describe some group or situation. And then if we think about what is an experiment, well, that talks about it on page 13. This cartoon goes with it and says, "Now eat that banana. The nicetician is watching us." And so what that's getting at is that an experiment, there is involvement between the individual and whoever's running the experiment. We want to give them sort of a treatment so that we can record what happens. And so the purpose of an experiment, as the book says, is to study whether the treatment causes a change in the response. So if you think about the difference between observation and an experiment, observation, you're watching. You're not doing anything. You're sitting on the sidelines. So you think about a police interrogation room. The person who's observing is the person behind the glass who can't see. And if you think about an experiment is like if you're ever in chemistry or physics and you're manipulating stuff, you're moving stuff. If you're thinking about chemistry, you're pouring chemicals or stuff like that. You're involved, and then you're recording what's occurring as you run the experiment. And so the differences between observational study and experiment. Well, an observational study, you're watching the individuals and measures variables of interest. There's no interaction. When observational studies happen when you're finding opinions through a survey or poll, you're just asking people different questions. And it's when it's not ethical to give someone a treatment and not others. So if you think about, cancer treatments, when you're trying to figure out if a cancer treatment is going to work or not, you're going to give it to everybody and see what happens when you're trying it out. They have to volunteer for it, obviously, but you're not just going to give it to one person and say no to the next person who comes along. Whereas an experiment, it imposes a treatment onto an individual. So you're looking to see if the treatment will cause a change in the variable. It's when you want to see a cause and effect of what's occurring. And it's when it's appropriate to give a treatment. And it's when you're testing a hypothesis. So you're coming up with, I think this is going to happen. Let's find out if it does. So you're going to have something where you are running an experiment and you are giving them the treatment. And then a lot of times you have somewhere where you're not giving the treatment and you're comparing what's occurring. So that's the difference between observational study and an experiment. So what I would like you to do now is you're going to pick a topic and let you pick whichever one of these 4 you want. Smoking, steroids, tanning, or fast food. And I would like you to create an example of an observational study and an experiment you could do for the topic. So one of each. So in your notes, you're going to come up with, what's an observational study you can do? What's an experiment you could do for each of these topics? And then today, if you remember, I would like you, once you finish that, to write the summary and your summary from the lesson today. What did you learn and what questions do you have? Keep in mind the essential outcome today is that you would be able to identify the differences between an experiment and an observational study. So pause the video here and write down your summary and any questions that you still have. If you take a look now, here's what I would say for my summary of what you guys learned today. During an observation, you only watch the individuals. There's no interaction. Or you give a survey. For an experiment, a treatment must be imposed on the individuals to see if a change happens. Experiments show cause and effect, but it's not always ethical to run an experiment. Thank you. This was lesson 3 or day 3 of probability and statistics, chapter 1. When you finish this video, then your next video will be number 4.